I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Kurt and Bart, costume designers on the Apple TV Plus Sci-Fi Epic Foundation. Guys, this show is so ambitious. You know, it's almost, you would think that it would be almost unadaptable for TV, and yet here we are after a really successful first season. The pilot in particular, the episode that you both designed for, to me, it displays an at times breathtaking avant-garde, like Met Gala type aesthetic that I was really into. I just couldn't wait to see each creation as the episode unfolded. And I'm wondering how much free reign you both had to really go big with some of the creations that you came up with.
I think, first of all, there wasn't a lot of time. So it was kind of like just diving right in. We'd worked with Rupert Sanders, the director, before on Ghost in the Shell. And I don't know, I think sci-fi for us is a really good fit. We came from fashion before we started doing movies, but sci-fi, fantasy, those worlds, you know, there's really no rules. And I think that's really exciting for us when there's no rules. So, you know, to kind of dive right in and look at each of these worlds and kind of figure out, you know, what is this world built on? What are their resources? All of that kind of stuff is kind of our springboard for designing something like this in world building.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. It's like the fact that there is no rules, we're kind of looking for rules because there was kind of this universe to dress in a super compressed time frame. So we're always trying to look for, like, what is the actual reason? What's the science behind what somebody's wearing, or what is their world like? You know, like Synax is this aqueous planet. So, like, it's funny you mentioned the Met Gala, because like before every show, but especially on this one, we go to the Met. We're New York based, and it's like the Metropolitan Museum has like an insane collection, including there was a lot of Inuit and aqueous clothing there. And so actually, like, Gal's coat that she wears and that everybody wears with the big hood was really kind of based upon this Inuit design.
But also kind of, you know, taking it literal, like maybe they make their clothes out of seaweed. You know, what are their real resources in this aquaculture? And you know, we partnered with this company that's doing really innovative stuff with leather, and they actually do a transparent leather. So that's what those coats were, and they really were almost like seaweed in a weird way.
Yeah.
And you know, there's little details in that I don't think anybody, you know, of course they noticed, but I don't think anybody would ever know. But Gal's, she wears this shirt and there's these little tiny petals, sequin petals on it, but those are made out of seaweed, real seaweed, kelp. So those kind of details are really fun for us, and I think that's how we kind of approached each world that we had to create.
But if you look back at your more recent credits, you know, obviously you've created some exceptional work in this kind of like retro futuristic design aesthetic, also a lot of sci-fi, Finch, Deadpool, Ghost in the Shell, Hunger Games, obviously. And you say, obviously you're attracted to that subgenre or sci-fi in general because there are no rules. But I always wonder, like, we've seen some of the most amazing costume work over the last, say, 5 years, like things like Mad Max, Dune, and of course now shows like Foundation. Like, how does it occur to you that you're constantly having to reinvent the wheel and try to find something new that we've never seen before? Like, I wonder, it's not a very a succinct way of asking this question, but how do you do that without making it look derivative? Like, you always seem to come up with something that's new and different that I've never seen before. I
mean, I think we really try to embrace the story first, like get into the script and like say, you know, in this version of science fiction, what is this future, and like what is the reality future? So we're trying to always base it on the reality of this imagined future, like, so that it feels grounded. Like, you know, like with the Cleons, like, you know, there was obviously connections to like the Roman Empire, and so we always research kind of deepest into what makes sense. And I think that's kind of been our approach to science fiction across the board and on these different films. I mean, I think there was so many versions of a dystopian future that like you saw so many of those on TV, like and on the big screen. So like I think for us, it's like first really embracing the story and trying to get into the reality of whatever that future is.
And I think also being inspired by things that aren't necessarily, I don't know, like the production designer Rory was really influenced with the sets with brutalist architecture, and which I love. But once we started really diving into that brutalist architecture, you start seeing the way that clothing and you know, the statuary, the clothing, how it's all represented in stone, and it's kind of done in these really like brutalist kind of planes. And if you look at Lee Pace's Day's robes, they're really done like that, but it's kind of this layered kind of effect with the velvet. Same with his cuirass, his armor cuirass, it's kind of this layered brutalist kind of thing. So to be able to find inspiration in architecture to make clothing is kind of exciting.
Yeah, that blows my mind because yeah, I noticed the brutalist aesthetic, and I wondered if that was intentional. Like, let's do a deep dive in some of the looks that you created. Like Lee Pace's brother Day, Emperor Cleon, relatively streamlined, regal blue color palette. I think that's probably how I would describe it as a layperson, with this metallic breast shoulder plate. Again, that's how I would describe it. What are you going for in that look for him? What are you trying to convey in that character?
It was funny with Lee because we put together, like always, our first conversation is a visual conversation. So like we get excited about a character or a story point, and we just start putting together visuals to kind of support like how we're thinking about it. So, you know, we had done some sketches of like some Roman kind of influenced things that his like very he presents himself in court, you know, wearing the armor, which was very much based upon ceremonial armor. You know, it's making a big statement. It's about power, and it was like reinforcing all the design motifs. But also, we sent Lee this picture of this ancient Roman. It was like a little glass bottle, and it was blue, and it was translucent, and like it's had survived since Roman days. And he really fixated on that, and he loved that it showed this kind of strength, but also this translucency and fragility. And so that's kind of started the whole conversation of like, let's make his armor translucent and let's use this color of blue.
But we've also always wanted to do translucent armor. So
yeah,
it was kind of finally an opportunity to try and do it. But I don't know, I had kind of forgotten about the blue bottle, and I saw an interview with Lee, and he brought it up. He said, that really stuck out to me when I talked to the costume designers at first. And it's, you know, it's a little thing. Again, it has nothing to do with clothing or costume or anything, but you can get inspired by the oddest things sometimes.
Yeah, I know. I hear that a lot, actually. And that's the beauty of having these conversations, because we as the viewer, of course, are not privy to all the work that goes behind the scenes to make these creations. Two in particular, I want to dive in a bit more into Trantor and Synax and Terminus, but the periphery kingdoms of Anacreon and Thespis, when they send their delegates to court, I've never seen anything like that. Like one is this, again, apologies if I'm not explaining it properly, but from my perspective, one of them is this bronze, scaly, bark-like hooded robe creation, and the other one is this geometric, translucent teal creation. They couldn't possibly be more diametrically opposed, obviously, because they're warring kingdoms. And I just would love to hear your process in getting to that end result, because it was mind-blowing how beautiful it looked on screen.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
I mean, the wood thing, to be honest, that came from, we found a kid in Ireland just out of fashion school. His collection, his final collection was done in wood, real wood. Wow. This laser etched kind of linked together kind of wood thing. It was just a weird, you know, coincidence that he was in Ireland, but he came and met with us and brought one of his pieces down. And to me, that's the same thing as us having a maker in our shop create something. So we brought him in as a maker. We based our designs on his process. So in the end, it was really exciting to let this kid experience, making something amazing for a show. And for us, we got to design something fantastic and use a process we've never used before. But those are literally, that is wood. Those are all laser cut and linked together with elastic. I mean, they were really incredible. I was really excited by those.
One of the things I love about, like we shot this in Ireland, and at first we're like, like we hadn't worked in Ireland before, had no idea what the crews were like, but every one of these projects you come in and then all of a sudden you start to discover like amazing talent. You know what I mean? Like the fact that that kid existed and the concept of his collection was so kind of integral to what our approach would be to this society, like the Anacreons. It was, I mean, I feel like we're lucky because we get to work with like really, really talented people.
And I think we're very open to that. And I don't know, again, I think that maybe comes from our coming up more in fashion world is and we moved to New York in the mid 80s to become fashion designers. I really, really, we always say this, I really, really respect people in fashion. I really respect what they do. It's uber creative and people, I like designers too, because they fixate on one thing and they learn how to do one thing really, really well. So I think we approach people all over the world to help us create our vision, because there's people all over the world doing incredible things. There's a company called Bibor who does really innovative knitwear, kind of cutting edge knitwear stuff. And we partnered with them and they created the fabrics for the kids on Terminus. So that's all that kind of quilted thing. And again, it's like, that's a very harsh planet. The environment's very harsh. So we wanted something that felt really protective and looked completely different. And we saw their knitwear and just thought that would be a good match. And it was.
Yeah, I mean, you preempted. I was going to bring up like Salvo with that hooded leather jacket that you referred to earlier. I'm trying to figure out a way to get one of those for myself. We've got winter coming up in Sydney. I'm going to need one. But the dark color palette on Terminus, I was really struck by that quilted Arctic vibe, but it was also really utilitarian. So it looked beautiful, but it was actually quite utilitarian, and you could probably find that somewhere in the Arctic countries. And I just was thinking, you're giving people opportunities like, the kid that you mentioned in Ireland, and you're open to bringing in fresh ideas, but you're also giving opportunities to people who may not have that kind of opportunity to begin with. So are you generally like that when you start a project, that you're looking for bringing on people, or was this kind of like a spur of the moment out of nowhere where you found the people with the knitwear?
I feel like it was out of the blue, but also like, I just think that like interest creates energy, and then like the internet's completely changed what we do since we did our first film. There is a level of connectivity and exposure that people can have for themselves. So young people can be posting things on Instagram, and we're constantly looking at things on Instagram just in terms of like inspirational images and doing image research. And so you get connected to these people, and it's really a global thing. And I don't know, it's a super exciting time. And also there's this like kind of like what's happening for really innovative young designers, like they're being inspired by things that they see on the screen, and then they're producing things, and then we're connecting with people and bringing them to projects. So it's this thing that kind of feeds like it's life inspiring art, inspiring life, inspiring art. I don't know.
No, you're right. I mean, and you referred to this earlier when talking about Gail's outfits on Synax. In fact, what they all wear, this, for people who don't know, it's a world developed by water. There's a lot of dark greens, organic textures, those silhouettes of like these huge hoods that are protective. And you mentioned the seaweed. I mean, again, what was the inspiration for that? Were you looking at cultures on Earth? Were you just thinking about being practical because it's wet? What was the genesis of the Synax costume?
It actually initially came from the fact that there are many companies experimenting with biofabrics, how we can grow fabrics, how we can get rid of plastics, how we can get rid of, petroleum products that make our clothes, all of that stuff. And there's people doing really crazy things like kombucha leathers and, growing making thread out of seaweeds and knitting it. And I think that's where it initially came from. Like, in the future, are we even going to be able to make fabrics the way we make them now? Or, is that going to evolve to something else? And I think that's really where all that came from.
Yeah, and then also I think that silhouette and the actual clothing itself, like, again, at the Met, there was this amazing coat that was like from Inuit culture, and it was super protective. And just the simple shape of the pattern, and then the shape of the hood, and then the hand stitching. I mean, that was the other thing. We wanted it to look really like these were handmade clothes. Like, you would receive one of those coats when you were a certain age, and you would wear it for your entire adult life. It's like,
Yeah.
It's like the way an indigenous culture would approach clothing. It's not fashion, it's culture, and it's utilitarian. It's like protective clothing.
And lived in, exactly. That's exactly how I perceived the Synax costumes. And finally, the Trantor costumes, to me, seem more tailored, muted. Maybe I'm wrong. I felt like there was a bit of a Asian vibe going there, particularly some of the tailoring. What was the inspiration behind the Trantor look? But not the emperor, but obviously the regular people.
I think that the Trantorians was one of the most challenging, just because there wasn't like, it wasn't like the water planet or this, really rough environment. Instead, it was just like, what is this version of the future? And so, like, I think for us with science fiction, we're always trying to keep it from being fantasy or too fantastical, and wanting it to be kind of grounded. So, like, again, kind of working with Rory Shane, the production designer, looking at how he was approaching the architecture, we tried to have there be like some echoes just in terms of the angles and like the way that garments would close. And, like, Harry is a good, his suit, like, he was dressed for court. Like, so he kind of like, we wanted his version of it was kind of like the most well-tailored version of it. And, Rupert also, like, Rupert loves playing with that stuff. Like, we would build a traditional suit, and then we'd say, like, what happens when we get rid of the lapel? And then it's like, oh, it doesn't look like a suit. We still need something there. So it was kind of this like subtractive, reductive.
But the thing you realize when you do stuff like that is you realize that the men's suit it's really a perfected garment.
Yeah.
There's a reason for everything. And you start taking things away like a lapel, like, it sounds cool in theory, but it suddenly makes a lot of things not work. So that's always kind of the challenge with, when you start messing with the traditional suit. It's an interesting road to go down, but you start realizing what a perfected piece of clothing that is.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how the men's suit has really not changed terribly that much over the centuries? I wear one every day, and it just allows it. I think it transforms you as clothes maketh the man, and so forth. And my final question is, yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, also how they're constructed too.
Yeah.
We had a tailor in London actually make Jared's suits, and they do beautiful suits. But here we were, making him make this crazy like panel that came up here and rolled over, and I think it made their head want to explode a little bit, to like kind of push them and make them do something that's so ingrained, to do the complete opposite. So yeah, but they did a great job.
They did, absolutely. So you're brought on to help create this world, build this world for this amazing show. You obviously work so closely together. You're passionate about what you've done, and then you have to hand it over to Emily Maldana, who took over as costume designer for the rest of the season. Is it difficult to let go of something and hand it over to another artist to continue and expand on your vision?
I don't think we never experienced anything like that, and I feel like less and less that used to really be the norm, where a designer would come in and do the pilot,
Yeah.
You know, and then the show would get picked up, and then, you know, another designer would take over for the show. So I think we kind of approached it in that kind of way, even though the show was already greenlit and, you know, they were just going to start shooting it. So I think there was a little bit of like, well, this is kind of weird. Emer was amazing. We got along great with her. We were all in the same office. You know, we had a lot to do, and we had a lot to do really, really fast. You know, we tried to stay in cahoots with her. She tried to keep, you know, on top of what we were doing and how that then would feed into later episodes. You know, it was an interesting way to work, but we all got along, and you know,
a lot of it carries through though too. Like that was another cool thing to see. It's like you see it. I mean, sometimes we were like, you know, like with the Thespins, like we were kind of like trying to imagine a whole world with one costume. Like there was, you know, there were multiple people wearing, but it was one costume. And then to kind of see like how, you know, Emer kind of could continue that thread. It was good. I mean, I felt like there was a lot of deep seeding that happened in the initial episode, you know, in that ep1, and it kind of pulled through to see her, you know, open that up. It ended up being a really cool experience.
And also, I think it helps too that a lot of the costumes created for the main characters in the first episode carry on through the season, which I think helps kind of balance it all, rather than it just after episode 1 changing course. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, I thought there was a real continuity there throughout the first season. But on that note, guys, congratulations on some really beautiful work on Foundation. Good luck this award season, and thanks for your time today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very
nice
much.
meeting you.